folks. For those of you who watched episode 10 of our series, you'll know that Wendy and I traveled down to Florida to meet with John Kretschmer and take his offshore sailing class. For those of you who don't know John Kretschmer, he's like an offshore guy. He's been doing it for an awful long time, and he's got some great books out, At the Mercy of the Sea, Sailing a Serious Ocean. And these are really kind of prerequisites for anybody who's planning on going offshore to find out really what's involved. It's not all going to be calm seas and manageable winds. Anyway, the point of this intro was to say that John and I are talking blue water boats in the interview that follows. And we make a distinction, or I make a distinction, between what we would all know as production sailboats. These are boats made by the big mass market manufacturers like Beneteau, Jeanneau, Dufour, Hansa, Bavaria. And these are the boats that you would almost universally see in the charter fleets around the world. There's also a subset of these yachts that are considered to be what we would call blue water cruisers, true passage-making boats. And they're designed for serious offshore work. They're more robust and bigger, and of course more expensive. They're not necessarily bigger, but they're more expensive and more stoutly built. And yet there's a lot of young couples out there. You see them all over the YouTube video world, taking really production coastal cruiser type boats offshore. And so the question I'm presenting to John through this interview is, what are your thoughts on that? He's a transfer skipper. He's taken a lot of production boats offshore before, and so trying to get down to the nub of it, like, what are the pros and cons of this? And so with that, we'll get into the interview. I do apologize for the sound quality. We had some sort of an issue with our microphone, and there's just nothing we can do about it. But the question and answers are audible and understandable, so I think you'll get what you need out of it. And this is something that people shopping for larger boats, like 40 feet and above, are constantly faced with when they're looking to choose a boat, trying to figure out which one is right for them. So with that, let's jump into it. Getting this started. As you know, with video, we can always I'll edit it all together.
Absolutely, sure.
When it's all done, so nothing's not fixable. And we'll make sure. I did want to start off by saying that this is John Kretschmer from John Kretschmer View, sailing legend. We signed up for your 4-day class, I guess it is, on blue water sailing. We flew down.
Appreciate it very much, you guys coming all this way.
Yeah. By all means, let's talk to the camera.
All right.
Well, I could set it up differently.
No, it's fine. This works groovy.
Okay. No, it's
such a wide angle lens.
A very wide angle lens. The point with this obviously is to talk about what's different for blue water sailing, and I had basically 5 questions, which should probably get us going pretty good. A lot of the people that we talk to, I mean, we're lake sailors, really, but with an eye toward going offshore and getting a bigger boat someday.
Right.
And invariably, like, the first place people are looking is production boats, and very quickly you start moving away from that because you realize that the offshore boat is really a different animal, and probably not that the production boat may not be for the offshore sailor, but the offshore boat may not be for your typical coastal cruiser either, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good way of putting it, actually.
And yet, so many of the younger cruisers that are out there these days are so money oriented that their choices are either to buy an older boat and fix it up, which they think is going to be cheaper, until they start doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
And they don't really usually, I don't believe, understand how intense the time commitment is to that.
Yeah, and the skill level.
And the skill sets, although those skill sets do transfer
they do.
later on.
Yeah.
But on the low end of the pricing structure for the boats that are out there, it's hard to avoid looking at the cruising boats. And so, because the market is flooded with ex-charter boats, Beneteau, Jeanneau, Dufour, and you do see a lot of people cruising with those boats. And of course, the forum people say they're insane. So let's just get into the first question I had, which is, when you search a web for blue water boat lists, the most common ones you come across are yours, John Kretschmer's, and John Neal. And has your opinion about blue water boats changed over the years? And how do you square a list of older boats that aren't being made anymore with what's available today?
It has, Kevin. It has changed a bit, based on a couple of things. One is that there are some boats that are just really old, and investing in them, even if they're still capable, there's a point where the cost-benefit analysis really becomes hard to justify. And also, the realization, I think the place you have to really try to focus in on, and it's the hardest one until you know, but is what you realistically plan to do with the boat. So we're talking blue water cruising. If blue water cruising is really your goal, like all the things we've talked about over the last 4 days, heavy weather things and serious sailing, you need a good boat. And when you need a good boat, you really need it. But blue water cruising is sometimes a misnomer for wanting to go traveling on your boat. If your desire is to buy a boat in Florida, sail the Bahamas, get to the Caribbean, and maybe even eventually go to Panama and up to the west coast of the U.S. via Mexico, you don't necessarily need a Hylas 49. You don't necessarily need a Contessa 32. A Beneteau First 38 put back together in really good shape can be an extremely capable boat, and in fact sometimes more rewarding in the light airs you encounter. So I think you have to really say, is blue water my thing? Am I going to cross the Atlantic? Am I going to cross the Pacific? Am I going to make those translatitudinal passages where the weather's stinky and potentially really dangerous? Those are the times when you need a good boat. So you can say, well, this is kind of crazy because you're always better off in a good boat, but good boats cost a lot more. So back to your question, those old but good boats are getting to be very costly to own. A 1977 Valiant 40 is just, by the time you replace the chain plates, you replace all these different things, you're really getting into money that might be spent a little bit more wisely on a fresher boat.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You got your start as a professional captain by being a transfer skipper, and you've taken a good cross-section of production boats offshore. What are your feelings about how the new boats fare in offshore conditions?
Well, I think anyone who reads my stuff knows that it's not so much that the new boats can't handle the offshore conditions. I think the construction of boats today is better than ever. And I really do believe that. What I have questions with and what I don't like are the shapes of the hull. So it seems like the priority has been made to blow them out into more or less floating homes more than boats designed to interact with the seas and heavy weather sailing. So you have to micromanage them in a way that you don't have to in a more sea-kindly boat. They survive, they're strong, the motion is bumpy and fast. They're not as friendly on the ocean in my view. And one of the great things about being in a sea-kindly boat is everything slows down. You know how you hear athletes talk about when they're in the zone and the whole game slows down? When you're in a really good boat in serious sailing, it all just kind of slows down and you feel like you and the boat are in it together. When you're in a not-so-great boat, it's all happening very fast. The ride's fast, it's bumpy, it's jerky, and so it's not so much that they're not up for it. I don't think they're dangerous or anything like that because they're sailing all over the world. It's just not as nice a feeling. It's not quite as cool.
Right.
Yeah.
That kind of almost brings me to the third question I had, which is almost to the one, the big production manufacturers and even the semi-custom builders are hiring the same designers to produce the next generation of sleek cruising yachts. Far Yacht Design, Luca Brenta, Judel Vrolik, Botina Karkik, Philippe Brand are examples. Many of us would categorize these boats as fast coastal cruisers as opposed to true blue water boats. What do you think about the new designs, especially in the larger sizes? And what happens when these are the only hulls that are available, especially at the lower end of the price scale?
That's a really interesting question. because it's really easy to kind of get trapped in your own time and think that the boats you grew up with are the only way you should sail. And I mean, I remember in my own lifetime encountering wooden boat people who thought fiberglass was unsafe and crazy and it was going to be the end of sailing. So I think that it's a dangerous place to kind of lock in on what you know and assume that's always going to be best. I think there's no question that many of today's designs are exhilarating to sail. They're really cool boats, that they are maybe redefining the relationship that I want to have with the sea in a way that's more, it's a different kind of sailing altogether. I think that problem will take care of itself for old dogs like me because I'll be gone when those are the only boats available, and the younger generation will gravitate toward them. I don't. And I liked how you phrased it because I was a delivery skipper for most of my life, so I've sailed all sorts of different boats. So it's not as though I read all the books and decided this was the right boat and that's the one to have. I kind of learned it by experience. I wasn't totally against fast boats or anything like that. So I kind of think if you haven't had the experience of sailing these really sea-kindly boats, you'll never really know what you were missing. But I suspect strongly sailing will just charge ahead in this new breed of boats, and the modern boats of today will seem kind of slow and stodgy to the boats of 2030 or whatever. I think it's just an evolutionary process.
Well, I'll add something in here that I hadn't really thought to put on my list of questions, but you wonder whether sometimes if you're making your living writing for Sail Magazine or Cruising World or something, that's your sole source of income. You get on these boats and you're just never going to be able to afford one. I mean, who's got $1 million to throw down on a new boat? And you wonder sometimes whether there's not some aspect of, I like what I have. I bought it for $40,000 and I fixed it up and it's the apple of my eye. And I'm just not ready to accept this other thing. But at the same time, you have to admit that the boats are the new boats, the new fast cruisers are lighter built, more lightly built and bouncier, like you say.
Yeah, no question about it. It's a different breed of boat. But there's a lot of truth to that. What I lament more maybe than the actual design change of boats is this idea that sailing is becoming less and less accessible. No matter how you slice it, how you cut it, the entry into the game has been raised. And you have to have a ton of money to buy a new boat. Most sailors can't even think about owning new boats. And that golden era from in the late 60s through the 70s and 80s, sort of that golden age of fiberglass when boats could be thought of as something every man could have. Nowadays, it's getting back to that wooden boat time when it was an age of yachting, the Gilded Age. And yeah, boats are really cool and there's amazing technology, but when a 40-foot production boat costs $450,000, even though everybody's salaries have gone up, they're still sky high out of shape. And that's a real problem because sailing itself is going to diminish as fewer and fewer people are engaged in it.
And yet the market's almost flooded with ex-charter boats, and I mean for $40,000 or $50,000 you can get probably a 50-foot Bavaria coming out of some charter. I mean, it's beat to death. It's a 1990s boat most likely, but that's the thing. That's the whole point of this conversation. It's not so much really what Wendy and I would buy, but it's just that whenever we talk to people, they say, "Well, it doesn't sound like it's that expensive," and you're kind of like, "No, you don't even understand."
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. And maybe in a way, this sounds kind of sad, but maybe in a way that all of these boats that are coming out of charter, kind of low quality production boats, they may not endure like their previous, like the boats of an earlier age, which were just built more solidly, and the hull shapes were designed in a way where they took less of a beating. They just may not endure, and there might not be this backlog of beater boats, and the new boat industry might need to respond to a broader market because there will be fewer used boats. I think the problem with the boating industry, the sailboat industry, for so long is the used boats linger out there. I mean, we saw coming back on our safety day yesterday, we saw 19, I'm sure there was a 67 or 68 Morgan 34. Looked beautiful, sailing nicely. And so, I mean, that guy's probably got 20,000 in that boat, and it looked smart, as opposed to spending 420,000 for a new Jeannot Sun Odyssey 44. I mean, it's it's a hard balance, but maybe those poor boats will finally go away, because as the newer boats don't last as long.
Unless they sink, they're not gonna. I mean,
Well,
really,
true.
the things are virtually indestructible.
Yeah.
So if you got these, this is a question I was pondering the other day. If you get these guys, the marine architects I'm talking about, drunk one night and press them on the subject, would they eventually laugh and blurt out that they're delivering the product that the charter companies want? Or would they argue that the new designs that they're producing are better, lighter, stronger than what was available in the 80s and 90s? In your opinion, how would they address the newer stability and motion comfort numbers, especially in light of the absence of easily available stability numbers like ABS and sticks? Those are not being released as easily these days. What are your thoughts there?
I think that the role of the naval architect has really changed. I think that during the glorious period of naval architecture, most guys, the Bob Perrys and Bill Krelaks, they were independent of any boat manufacturer, and they were kind of able to have a large personal interjection into the designs. They tended to be experienced sailors, people with miles under their belt. Today's designers are often great sailors, but it's usually in a performance-oriented way, and there's so few design commissions out there nowadays that they're really more tuned into what the manufacturer wants. And there's no question that the growth area of sailing is in chartering. Chartering kept sailing alive during the Great Recession. Charter fleets continue to expand. It's hard to meet anybody who sails who hasn't been on a Virgin Islands charter. Chartering is kind of the lifeline of sailing, and it's a very cool thing in my mind. But and so if you're a manufacturer, it makes sense to sort of want to play that game. Those boats typically do not make very good blue water cruisers. I think the naval architects are just totally caught in the middle. I don't think they have any clout. I think that they need the commissions. It's all done by the manufacturers, and they're just trying to meet. They're basically getting an assignment to design a boat for a certain situation, and that's what they're designing. I think left to their own devices, they might look at it differently. Naval architects tend to be tech people. We live in this amazing age of material, and I think they would still look at building super fast, super light boats, because that's what's fun. Designing boats like I like would seem like it's probably drudgery to design an old boat. I mean, Perry's got this new boat coming out, the Carbon, whatever he calls it, and he's having fun kind of going back to his roots, designing a full keel boat, but it's totally a high-tech full keel boat. He said the only way he could do the project was because of the tech side of it. So I think that the naval architects are just they deliver where the market goes. I think we as sailors and the manufacturers as builders, that's where the meeting of the minds need to come together to change certain things. I was telling Bob just yesterday that I think there's a market for a new 40-foot production world cruising boat, maybe even made out of aluminum, that sells for $250,000. It's not the Westsail 32, but it's still a Sea Kindly hull that sort of reaches out and says to the middle class of the world who have these dreams, here's a boat, go do it in. I think that boat would be a huge success.
Well, it would, but I think the problem you run into is, if you go to a boat show, you got the guy from Sunsail or Moorings or something who's got a shopping list for 12 boats, and then you've got you or me sitting there thinking
No.
like, we're gonna buy, and the Bluewater boats are available, it's just that they're gonna be from Passport or Oyster,
But they're so expensive.
and they're so expensive.
Right,
You're
and
talking
so
about
they-
a boat north of $1 million, like,
Right,
right
so
off the bat, and
I think that a new method of, you know, a new little a niche that would be successful would be an affordable cruising boat that's new, still money, so there's money to be made, but within the realm of the middle class buyer.
yeah. We're done.
Yeah,
That
all right,
was
brother,
all of
yeah.
it.
A little thank you.
Yeah.
Thank him
Oh,
again.
Ah, of
Sorry,
course. Thank
yeah,
you,
yeah.
John. Now,
Thanks,
this has been-
Kevin.
This has been great.
Thanks
It's
so
been-
much, and
Yeah.
Wendy too for coming
Thank
down
you.
here. That's fantastic,
Such a
guys.
pleasure.
And we
Yeah.
really recommend that people take John's classes or do one of his trips because it has been nothing but a blast and a ton of fun since we've gotten here. And John's made us feel completely welcome, and so we do appreciate it.
No, it's been my pleasure, and it's gonna be great to
Thank
sail
you.
together next year. It's gonna be
Absolutely.
good fun.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, man. Yeah, awesome.
All
So,
right.
yeah.